They thought this would work. They hoped that Donald Trump was going to sink in the polls immediately following that guilty verdict, which I'm telling you was a setup, an epic, total setup that will eventually get reversed. Question is, does it happen in time for the election? Probably not. But they had hoped that this would actually result in Biden soaring and Trump plummeting. Well, guess what? They get exactly the opposite. And by the way, people that were on the fence are now coming out in droves for Donald Trump. They had a record amount of money that they have raised just in the last few days since this has happened. I'm going to tell you all about it. Plus, we got to get to Anthony Fauci, who's on Capitol Hill today, getting grilled. You're not going to believe some of the things that are coming out of his mouth. Of course, you probably will. You probably will. But we're going to cover it anyway. You got to see this. Just got to see this. Boy, did he jump the shark. And Hunter Biden on trial for some pretty bad stuff. How much you want to bet that, some shenanigans are going on behind the scenes? Did you see him biking with Pops over the weekend in Wilmington, Delaware? Yep. Trying to make it very, very clear, just so you know who my daddy is. Hello, welcome to the show, everyone. I am Trish Regan. This is the Trish Regan Show. Make sure that you subscribe, make sure you like, make sure you hit the bell so you know when I'm here live every single day. We got so much going on. And do me a favor, do the like and share and get the word out because we're growing and growing and growing, and it's all thanks to you guys. Really and truly. I mean, this is all organic. It's just amazing to see the response. I want to turn right now to the breaking news that Democrats are getting really, really worried right now because their little plan that they had hatched, the one with Alvin Bragg and Judge Merchan and a jury of 12 from New York City in a district where you got maybe 5 or 6% of the population voting for Donald Trump. They got the guilty verdict, and they thought that this would actually result in Donald Trump losing all his support, just support eroding overnight in favor of Joe Biden. But guess what? Exactly the opposite occurred. And you know what? I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all because I think if people were on the fence, all of a sudden now they're like, wow, this is real. This is real. Of course, you're not supposed to think like that, right? They've been gaslighting us all along. And the whole idea is if you actually don't believe in the jury's verdict, if you actually believe that maybe, just maybe somehow this was a setup because, they held it in New York City where nobody voted for Trump and they had a very biased judge whose daughter, by the way, profits off of the very trial that he's moving forward with. If you might have thought that maybe it was just a little bit biased because the judge instructed that jury to find him guilty on any array of charges, he gave them 3 to pick from, said you don't have to be unanimous on what you think he's guilty of, only that he's guilty of something. I mean, to take a misdemeanor from years ago and now turn it into a felony crime when the Federal Elections Commission couldn't even find anything wrong. Well, let me just say, that was just a little bit skewed, just a little bit, but you're not supposed to think that. In fact, if you dare to think that, then you are on the other side. You are the opposing side. You are the problem. Well, Americans are like, no, I'm not the problem. You're the problem. And the fact that you could do this to a guy, when, by the way, you know as well as I do, if this were somehow not going their way, then it would be the problem with the justice system, right? That's what we keep hearing with the Supreme Court. Oh, the Supreme Court is bad. The Supreme Court, we got to get rid of Alito. He's bad because his wife flew the flag upside down in their yard one day. He's a bad dude. We have a problem, Supreme Court, because, well, it's a conservative leaning court, and that in and of itself means it's an issue. No, they don't believe in the legal system unless the legal system is actually doing their bidding, and that's what they got it to do in New York City. But it doesn't matter because the people that voted for Trump last time that maybe were kind of apathetic and didn't go out to the polls and vote for him again in the same kind of way that they may have in 2016. Well, guess what? You just motivated him, Joe Biden. You just motivated him, Alvin Bragg. Judge Merchan, you just got everyone to say, I'm going to get off my tail. I'm going to hightail it to the polls, or I'm going to send in an absentee ballot. But no matter what, I'm going to vote. And by the way, maybe I'll actually donate some money while I'm at it. Look at these numbers. I mean, just incredible how much money he has raised. I'm going to get to that in a second. But first, did you see what happened over the weekend over in Newark, New Jersey? Now, full disclosure, I'm not really a UFC fan. Surprise, surprise. I'm really not. But Donald Trump is. And he was there over the weekend. and got this just tremendous reception from the people. I think that this is saying something, right? Because it's in Newark, New Jersey, not too far from where he was just torched in New York City. But take a look here at the crowd going wild. We don't have the audio, but you can see the excitement. You see that excitement. And Trump's waving out. He's just getting this outpouring of support. People are holding up Trump signs. Really just tremendous reception from people. Incredible to see. And then this was really incredible to see because Kevin Holland, who's a UFC fighter, he won his fight. And at the end of the fight, just as, he's finishing the guy off and he staggers up, he can barely stand. Let's go to this video. And you see him just sort of making his way over to the side of the ring. And it's really something. Where does he go? He goes straight to Donald Trump. He actually literally climbs out of the ring and kneels down and shakes his hand. And it's just interesting. I mean, interesting to see this level of support. I don't think that Joe Biden would get anything close to that. And certainly Joe Biden would get nothing close to the $200 million that was just raised. Oops, I gave it away. I mean, an enormous amount of cash was just raised. The most the RNC has gotten. It's really incredible to think that, Biden, I mean, he couldn't even come close to this. They did some 70 million, I believe, in just mom and pop donations. And then there were big donations actually from a lot of tech entrepreneurs. Interestingly enough, we talked about Elon Musk maybe going to the White House with Donald Trump. Let's go to Eric Trump, who was on Maria Bartiromo's show on Fox over the weekend, and hear his view on it.
This might be a little inside information, but as I was leaving my house about 37 seconds ago, I asked my wife, what are we up to now? And she said, just in terms of small dollar, we're well over $70 million. This is $21 donations, $43 donations, right? Small dollar donations. If you add the large dollar donations to it, you're over $200 million, but you're over $70 million. And by the way, Maria, wow. 30% of those people have never been seen before by a political party, right? I mean, these are Americans who are pissed off. They're coming out of the woodwork, and they want to support a guy that they just believe is getting bamboozled by a system. And we saw it with impeachment 1. We saw it with impeachment 2. We see it where they weaponize every liberal DA and AG across the country with one intent, to take him down, to slander him, to ruin his reputation, to try and divide his family, to try and bankrupt him, to throw him in jail, to do whatever the hell they can do. And America sees through it. They know exactly what's going on.
Incredible. So it's a lot of money, guys. It's a lot of money. I mean, Joe Biden is going to have to hold a lot of fancy dinners to even come close to that, all right? So that's good news for Donald Trump. And then when you look at the polls that are coming out, they're not showing a seismic shift of any. I mean, I'm looking at them and I'm looking at the spin too, because there's always spin, right? The left-wing media trying to spin these things. Here's a Reuters Ipsos poll, and they're trying to say, and you have to do like a double take when you read this headline. It's exclusive. 1 in 10 Republicans less likely to vote for Trump after guilty verdict. This is according to their poll. But then when you look down deep into the poll, you actually see the majority of Republicans are still voting for Donald Trump. And by the way, the support that he's getting amongst the base just went through the roof, right? Anybody who was thinking of voting for him before now wants to vote for him even more. In terms of the 10%, I'm betting those were Nikki Haley supporters anyway, right? They were the people that were kind of on the fence. And then you have to think about how they're phrasing these questions, right? When you call up and say, hey, are you willing to vote for a convicted felon? And that's what they want to play over and over and over again, the convicted felon thing. In fact, Alex Soros, who's the son of George Soros, had a tweet when this whole thing came out. And he said, we need to keep hitting the convicted felon thing over and over and over and over again. Don't even refer to him by name. Just keep saying convicted felon, because that's how they think they're going to win. The problem with that is, as all of this seeps in and people say, gee, maybe this was kind of a sham trial. Maybe this whole financial misdemeanor thing, which, by the way, was kind of hard to prove in and of itself, getting escalated to a felony when they can't even define the actual crime. Maybe that is a problem. There's a lot of bias out there, certainly in the media itself, and I think people are seeing through it, and it's cutting, it's cutting in a way that the left did not anticipate, because they can't actually figure this guy out. It's sort of funny. Like, they can't figure Donald Trump out. He's got this nickname, Teflon Don, sort of for a reason, right? Because every single time they hand him this bad news, he's somehow able to push through and triumph through and make it better for himself. I mean, look at the newspapers, right, that came out on Friday, right after the conviction. Guilty, 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 guilty. That's all we saw everywhere. It just lined the streets, right? Guilty. I mean, literally on the streets, we had video of people writing the words guilty 34 times. This is what they were saying. Hey, over on The View, ABC's The View, we had Whoopi Goldberg, I know you love her, saying guilty as many times as she could. Here we go.
We only have about 34 seconds left, so to recap, guilty, 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 guilty.
Okay, does she know how many times she can say? Can she count to 34? I guess that's what she's proving there. You know, look, the bias is really, really rampant. Obviously, Joy Behar, her colleague over there, sharing that sentiment, right? I think all of them on that couch there at The View. That's why we don't watch it. That's why I occasionally do watch it, just to make sure you guys know what else is out there. Joy Behar completely embarrassing herself. I mean, this is just embarrassing to watch, but we might as well play it and get a good laugh out of it. Here's Joy Behar, just so excited.
Well, my reaction was I was at Costco buying, 10 boxes of Keurig coffee, and my watch started to buzz, and I got so excited I started leaking a little bit.
Yeah, not funny. Embarrassing, but not funny. Joy Behar, ladies and gentlemen, that is The View. All right, so that's the spin of the mainstream media. That's mainstream. That's ABC News. It's produced by ABC News, owned by Disney, of course. Disney, that's a wild stock. I encourage you, by the way, if you haven't already, to go to 76research.com. 76research.com. It's my financial publication. I share with Rob Horton, longtime friend, brilliant investor, brilliant stock picker. And Disney is something that we've reported on in the past. We've been watching it very carefully. Nelson Peltz is out now, so they don't have the same kind of pressure to actually clean up their act. But one of the things that Bob Iger is trying to do is sell off ABC News. He's trying to sell all his legacy TV businesses and kind of convert and contort himself into the new business, which is, hey, what we're doing right here on the Trish Regan show. So this is the future. ABC, Disney, kind of behind the times. We talk about it over on 76 Research. You should get the 76 report. I encourage you, go sign up at 76research.com. Actually, some really good stuff in there. Rob is out with a new note because he's increasing holdings in one particular stock because another has just outperformed so dramatically, which is great news, that it enables us to actually look around and get something else. So a new opportunity coming your way. I encourage you to look at both 76 Report and the model portfolios. But back to Disney, back to Whoopi, these women, their bias is just through the roof. And so even in the face of this, right, where you have all the media, the newspaper saying guilty, guilty, guilty. You get ABC's The View attacking you left and right. Certainly MSNBC, that's a given. You get CNN going after you. This is a good one. And yet none of it matters, right? None of it matters. People are saying enough. I'm sick of the media. I'm sick of the status quo. I'm sick of not having enough money because inflation is so through the roof. I'm sick of Joe Biden. And I think that this is why you're going to see people coming out in force. Unlike anything, they've just unleashed the beast, as I said on Friday. They have unleashed the beast. And that beast would be the GOP, conservatives who believe in law and order, who believe in the rule of the land, and actually believe in having a society that is a real meritocracy, that is a fair society where you're not using lawfare, literally lawfare, to go after your opponents. That's what this is, ladies and gentlemen, pure and simple. And they'll try and spin it however they can, but I think Americans see through it. And that's what's being reflected in these polls. There was also a CBS poll out. There was also a flash poll by Daily Mail where he was up 6 points. So go figure, right? Go figure. CNN has its bias. It's pretty obvious. It's pretty blatant. I mean, they tried to tone it down a little bit because, they got themselves that little debate coming up. Jake Tapper is going to take on Biden with Trump. And Biden's going to sit there, convicted felon, convicted felon, convicted felon. I know how that's going to go. Anyway, CNN tried to really bury Kevin McCarthy over the weekend and bury Trump and point out that this is an issue of character, right? He's just a bad guy, and that's what you ultimately need to decide this election on. But I love this because McCarthy actually rose to the occasion, right? I know a lot of you are not huge fans, but this is a good example of being able to really turn it back on a not so very smart reporter. The issue of character being one that, frankly, this particular president clearly is devoid of, really doesn't have much of, frankly. I want you to see this. This is I can't pronounce his name, so I won't even try. Some guy over on CNN, Manu, with Kevin McCarthy. Watch.
He said, it's not about policy, essentially. He says it's about character. He says it's about character. Why don't you agree?
Look, I would, because everybody's entitled to their own opinion. And you know what? I've served with both presidents, with President Trump and President Biden. And I'm making a decision on what's best for the country. We didn't have inflation. We didn't have war in Europe. We didn't have 5 embassies evacuated. We didn't have 13 Gold Star families by a missed decision in Afghanistan. We didn't have this new axis of evil that we haven't seen from the 1930s pushing
but
China.
So character shouldn't matter. I'm wondering.
Character matters, but there's a whole support. And is there a character matter when you say Biden used his own power to tell the American public that the laptop was not true, that Biden used now through the Secretary of State to go to 51 people in the intel community, former CIA directors, to tell the American public that that wasn't true?
Well, you're concerned about character there, but not character about Trump.
But I'm weighing it all. I'm being consistent. You're being inconsistent in this if you listen. Think for one moment. You're saying only character matters and you're only going after Trump. People are human in this place of where we go. This is a decision of an issue that people knew about since 2016, so they voted on it. You're going back to something 10 years. So if character matters, would you put somebody up on trial just because they're your political enemy? I think that matters into character.
Yeah. I mean, that's the fairest characterization, really. Would you put somebody on trial just because they are your political enemy? Look, Donald Trump had the chance to with Hillary Clinton. Remember that? I mean, everybody wanted her to be put on trial, and he didn't take that opportunity. He actually didn't. And I spoke to him about the time, and he said, you know what? She's the wife of the former president. She was running against me. She was my opponent. That wouldn't be very American. That would be like what they do in third world countries. And so, it was fun on the campaign trail. Remember the whole like you'd be in jail thing during the debate? It was a good laugh. But when push came to shove, he actually didn't follow through on that. That's interesting because the left, on the other hand, they're following through on everything. They're just trying to take him down. Listen, and if you dare for 1 second to think, hey, maybe this is a little extreme. Maybe they're doing exactly what they're threatening he might do. They're actually doing it in real time. Then you're the problem. Maxine Waters. Now, this is a woman who has sort of made her entire political career, ladies and gentlemen, on feeding this divisiveness. I mean, you think about some of the LA riots and the way she talked about those. You think about even just in the past administration, when Trump was president, and how she encouraged everybody to go out there and to confront members of the administration and say, how dare you work for this guy? That was her thing. And then it actually happened, right? People were going after members of the Trump administration. Remember the former head of Homeland Security? They went after her in a Mexican restaurant. She's just trying to eat dinner with her husband. Or think about Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who got targeted. They threw her out of a restaurant that she was trying to just have a meal at with her husband and her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law, who actually was the Hillary Clinton supporter. I mean, this is crazy times. And it was Maxine Waters who encouraged it and actually said on camera, I won't bother you with the old sound, but you know what she said? Go after them, hunt them down, find them in department stores, wherever they are. Well, now listen to what she's saying. Now she's saying, no, you're the problem, not us, not me, because I suggested you do this in the first place. It's the Trump supporters that are at issue. Here we go.
and Congresswoman Waters, your name has been invoked several times. We're going to give you the last word. What do you think?
Well, let me just say, when I tweeted about Trump talking about the Constitution, I basically said in my tweet that he had disregarded the Constitution. He doesn't have any respect for the Constitution. I got over 1.3 million hits on that. And so I think in the final analysis, the American people see through him, and they're going to be guarded in how they deal with this election. Let me just say this. I'm worried that he's so divisive and that he's talking about retribution and they're talking about revenge. And I think that that's dangerous. He's even mentioned a civil war at one point, talked about there would be bloodshed. I am going to spend some time with the criminal justice system, with the justice system, asking them, tell us what's going on with the domestic terrorists. Are they preparing a civil war against us? Should we be concerned about our safety? What is he doing with this divisive language? It is dangerous, and we're going to have to make sure that we understand that we're not at risk with this man talking in the way that he's doing. This is not good for this country, but he does not care about democracy. He does not care about the Constitution of the United States. He's in love with Putin and Russia and Kim Jong-un and North Korea and all of that. And so it's not just that he's a criminal. This is a man who disrespects the Constitution and democracy. And we have got to find out what they're doing as domestic terrorists tried to take over the government January 6th. How far is this going to go? Are they going to be attacking? Whom are they going to attack? What are we going to do? I've got to get on with trying to get an investigation going about that.
Oh my gosh. And everybody's like smiling and nodding their head in approval. Basically, what she's doing is setting the stage, ladies and gentlemen, to be able to go after any and all political opponents. Right? If you oppose the Democrats, then you are the problem. I mean, this is not who we are. This is not our country, and I think that now that the stakes are getting raised to a level which the Democrats are going to wish they never had raised it to. Maxine Waters, the very woman who is encouraging everybody to go after and hunt down anybody who worked for the Trump administration. Wow, now saying that she's going to hunt down effectively anyone who supports him. I mean, this is a problem, okay? This is really and truly a problem. And nobody on MSNBC challenges her on any of that. Forget about it. You know, I think this editorial in The Telegraph actually said it well. And it's interesting to read sort of what they're saying overseas about this. Even The Telegraph has gone, whoa, this is too much. This author writes that in some ways, you do have this kind of civil war, not like in the traditional violent sense where people are going to, take up arms, et cetera, but you have the civil war going on. And he said, look, I know that I'm running a risk making that comparison, but the reality is there's something to this. Basically, it's more difficult to define, he writes, than Confederate versus Union, but it's rural versus urban, blue collar versus educated, Christian versus secular, with issues such as abortion and immigration that determine, identify, and define compromise. The two parts of the nation really hate each other. And then he said, you can blame Trump for that, fine, but Democrats have actually raised the stakes. They've raised the stakes, he writes, by calling him a wannabe dictator, implying that a second term would mark the end of the republic. And now by labeling him a criminal, they've put him totally beyond the pale. I mean, this is bonkers stuff. He concludes here with why there's a special hate for him, meaning Trump, escapes me. The deadliest thing a president can do is go to war, yet Trump avoided it, while George W. Bush declared to, killed millions, and is apparently the acceptable face of the Republican Party. Reality is less important than perception. Trump's people attack Biden as a far left failure, yet he's copying Trump's policies at the border, and the economy is going well. He continues, I'll just read you again. I was just really struck by this again. An overseas writer saying, legal experts now say it's unlikely that he would actually go to jail, but if prison is possible, quote, I'd put money on it happening. It's clear that the goal of this exercise isn't to prove the banal point that no one is above the law. It is to stop Trump from serving another full term. And he's absolutely right. And this is somebody who's writing it that's not necessarily a fan of Donald Trump, says he's actually not. But it's really stunning what they're willing and able to do to try and stop him. And they're using every law they can come up with. Alvin Bragg campaigned on it. Think about that. Back in 2021, Alvin Bragg actually boasted that he should win the office because he was the best to go after Donald Trump, that he had had experience, and that he had been the chief deputy when they sued the Trump administration 100 times for the, quote, Muslim ban thing and then some other immigration stuff. So he was the guy for the job because he would put them away. They all want to say, I'm going to put them away. That's what Fannie Willis is doing. That's what Letitia James was doing, trying to come up with, what, a $500 million fine with the judge there to go after him. This is bonkers. This is absolutely bonkers. But you know what? Again, if they put him in jail, that would be interesting to see. James Comey over the weekend was talking to Jen Psaki over on MSNBC, who used to work for Biden. She was the communications person there before they got KJP for the job. And he's saying, well, he'd live in his own trailer. He'd have a double wide. this, that, and the other. They're trying to describe the prison scenario for Donald Trump if he, in fact, is running from prison. Whether or not Judge Merchan decides to do that, we'll see. I think if he could, he would, but he has to also consider how much that's going to backfire. Look at how much everything has backfired thus far. Donald Trump was asked the question over the weekend on Fox and Friends. They said, hey, would you still actually run if they throw you behind bars? And I don't think you're going to be surprised by the answer. Let's listen.
Could it? The judge could decide to say, hey, house arrest or even jail.
It could.
Face what that could be.
I'm okay with it. I saw one of my lawyers the other day on television saying, oh, no, you don't want to do that to the president. I said, you don't beg for anything. You just, the way it is.
Yeah. He's okay with it. Probably wouldn't love it, but he's okay with it. And so he's just willing to take all this stuff on over and over and over and over again. And in doing so, he's rising up in the ranks. I mean, effectively, what Judge Merchan and the Democrats just did was make him a martyr of some kind. I mean, you got Joe Biden on the one hand, right, who can't find his way out of a paper bag, who can't seem to stand up, who can't seem to remember anything, who can't seem to get the economy or immigration or anything else under control. New report, by the way, I got to share with you on immigration that will just blow you away. That's coming up. But you've got Joe Biden, who is clearly a problem, a major problem for this country. And yet, they're trying to make it all Trump. It's all Trump's fault. Trump is the bad guy. And he may even, in fact, be running from jail. It's just amazing. Just amazing stuff to see. I mean, this is why I think it's so important that as we think about the future, as we think about where we are right now, we think about the policies in place that are here to protect us as Americans, right? Protect your freedom of speech, protect you from mass inflation, protect you from wars that shouldn't be happening, right? I mean, I'm a big believer. If you gotta go to war, you gotta go and you gotta be all in. So you need a strong military, and yet simultaneously they're cutting military spending. I mean, it's ridiculous. Sort of they want to have their cake and eat it too. It's just absolutely stunning to see. And this is why I'm proud to partner with Americans for Prosperity. AmericansForProsperity.com, everyone. I encourage you to go there and check them out, because Americans for Prosperity is an organization that really cares about the policy things that are going to drive us forward as a nation. So they're out there right now trying to identify the smartest politicians so that we actually not just take the White House, right? We need that, but we need the House, we need the Senate. You got to have it all, the whole kit and caboodle. You got to start thinking about who your judges are all around the country. Do you really want more judges like Judge Merchan? There's a lot of legwork that has to be done. These guys are there doing it. AmericansForProsperity.org. Go there today. Sign up for their emails. It's well worth it. AmericansForProsperity.org, and learn about what they're doing. All right. So we've got just chaos here in that everything is so one-sided for Biden. I mean, think about what's going on. I mean, to me, it's election interference. This is full-on election interference. I mean, you stage a trial, you time it just perfectly for right around the time that he's supposed to be campaigning. He can't go out and campaign because he's got to be in the court every day. Oh, and then you slap him with a guilty verdict, so now you can run around and say, okay, he's a convicted felon, and then you don't have any time for an appeal or for it to escalate to the Supreme Court, which is where it may, in fact, wind up, a Sixth Amendment issue. No. Instead, they're just going to run with this story all day long, while simultaneously not going after Biden for some of the things that, well, frankly, they've gone after Trump for. I mean, consider those documents that were found in the garage next to his Corvette. I was going to say Ferrari, but no, I stopped myself. He doesn't have that much money. That would be his son who had that kind of money. And the brother, right? The son who is in court today, which we'll have to talk about. So Biden is not in any kind of trouble. No, Robert Hur's not willing to go after him at all because he's too senile. He's too feeble. He's too, quote, according to Hur's report, too much of a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. Okay, do what you want with that. Like, either you say he's a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory running our country, or you can infer that they're coming up with excuses so as not to actually prosecute him. Either way, not good. New revelation today that And this is thanks to a FOIA request from the Heritage Foundation, the oversight committee there that's looking into everything that happened. Guess what? It was discovered that in the transcripts, because, we can't hear this, he's using executive order. You're not allowed to hear any of his conversation with Robert Hur. Well, the White House went through and omitted things like and the use of the term I. I mean, this is effectively the doctoring of a potentially criminal transcript. What, to make him look better? Really? Can you imagine if the Trump team did this? Can you imagine the hell that you'd have to pay if Trump's team dared to alter a transcript so as to make Trump appear better and lose the ums and the I's, etc.? And remember, they are not allowing you to hear these transcripts. He's using an executive order. And it's getting backed up by his whole team, which is a whole other issue, right? Like, somebody's going to take real issue with that because it's not right. The public should have a right to hear some of this stuff. Anyway, this was Robert Hur not too long ago saying that, basically he committed a crime, but they couldn't prosecute. Watch.
Based on the facts and anticipation of defenses presented in your report, could a reasonable juror have voted to convict?
As I said in the report, some reasonable jurors may have reached the inferences that the government would present in its case in chief at trial.
So a reasonable juror could have voted to convict based on the facts that you presented?
Correct.
Yeah. But for some reason, it's not happening. And now we can't hear the tapes either. So there you go. Unbelievable. I mean, it is so one-sided. This is the problem, and this is the scary thing. I mean, that's when, there's all this talk of civil war, and we don't mean in the violent sense of 1865. What we're talking about here is just a divide that's so great, and the danger here being that you really do go full-on republic, banana republic, where you have one team in charge calling all the shots, and anybody who dares to push back in any way, shape, or form, well, they're toast. You know what? They're going to sue you. They're going to put you behind bars. They have every right to do so because you are part of the opposition and you can't oppose this particular regime. Hey, Maxine Waters just said it, right? She just said it. And she's setting up something. It's alarming. It's alarming. Again, considering they're not going after him, Joe Biden, because he's just a feeble old man, can you not ask yourself again, is that election interference? I mean, they had every reason to go after Hillary Clinton. And don't forget, they chose not to. They chose not to. Why? Because, it would be bad for America. It's bad for the system if you go after a candidate. This was James Comey explaining that at the time. Back in 2016, when it was discovered that, yes, in fact, she committed a crime because she was having her government emails on her own private server. That was a problem. And yet they didn't do squat. Remember, let's listen to Comey.
Although there is evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of classified information, our judgment is that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case.
And yet, look what was brought against Donald Trump. They went after him on a financial misdemeanor, accusing him of paying off this woman and having her sign an NDA in order to protect his family from the emotional turmoil that they were already going through plenty. Maybe, if you want to argue, was this helping the campaign? Well, it probably helped the campaign, but don't forget, you can still make a very solid argument that it was helping him from a personal perspective, okay? So they take this finance violation, this misdemeanor, and then they turn it into something far larger, the felony, even though the Federal Election Commission never actually found any kind of crime there. I mean, if you really want to talk about potential federal election crimes, can we not talk about the dossier that Hillary Clinton's team bought and paid for? Her lawyers, by the way, Perkins Coie was the law firm that hired that group, bunch of former Wall Street Journal investigative reporters that went out and hired that ex-British spy, Christopher Steele, who went and hired some people that, by the way, the U.S. suspected of being Russian spies. I'll throw that out there. So crazy. And they come up with this concocted story, which was completely discovered to be totally untrue. I could have told you that, and I did when I read the dossier myself, because you know what? Intel reports don't actually read like they belong in the National Enquirer. Anyway, this one really did. And yet, Hillary never paid any kind of price for that one, right? Using campaign funds for that kind of stuff. I mean, they did at the time say it wasn't really right, but blah, blah, blah. It all went away, right? It gets swept under the rug because unless it's your opponent, unless you're a Republican, they're not going to go after you. And I point this out because I think it's really important to think about. It's not just Trump. I mean, granted, he's willing to take things on in ways that maybe a lot of regular folks are not willing to take on, right? He said he'll run from jail if he has to. He just told us that. But it doesn't matter. They would do it to anyone. They started saying similar stuff about Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley. They went to the race card, of course, and they said all kinds of horrendous things about both of them when they thought that they were a threat. I mean, George Bush is not now, like the Bush family is suddenly ingratiated, right? They're great now because they feel sort of nostalgic in comparison. So the Democrats are okay with them. But the truth about that really has a lot to do with the fact that the Bushes no longer have any power. This is a new party. This is a MAGA party, right? This is Make America Great Again. And that's why Joe Biden wants to keep reminding you how bad it is. Despite 75 million Americans voting for Donald Trump last time, I think many, many more Americans are going to vote for him going forward. I think that it reminds me of 2016 all over again. It's a giant, you know what, Michael Moore said this well, right? Michael Moore actually said it would be a giant FU to the establishment. And that's what you're seeing. A lot of people that might have been on the cusp, even people that were maybe going to vote for RFK Jr., I suspect now they are going to vote for Donald Trump because they're so sickened by what the system has become. Somebody who's a big part of that system, of course, is our friend Anthony Fauci. He's like chief bureaucrat, right? Little guy, big bureaucrat, big bureaucrat, was telling you what to do, how to think, where you could go, who you could talk to, whether you'd be employed. This is a guy who I think history will judge quite poorly. Now, it was a crazy time. I'll give him that. But the problem that he had and the bureaucrats around him had was that they were all scientists, right? They didn't have any economists in the group. They didn't have any psychologists in the group. There was no one saying, gee, maybe this whole shutting down of the schools thing won't serve American school children so well in the future. Maybe this whole social distancing thing will actually create mental health challenges in the future. Maybe you can't just rip people's livelihoods out from under their feet. I mean, there are businesses that shut down that have never reopened. There were things that were done that economies and people just can't recover from. But Fauci, being all about the science, only considered the science. That was it. And so they had a very narrow view of what should be done. I was called out at the time, and I stand by everything I said when I said, you know what? They're politicizing this. This is a whole other component of it, right? There was a political motivation going on as well, with the likes of Maxine Waters saying that she was never going to take a vaccine that was developed under the Trump administration. You had Kamala Harris saying similar stuff. I mean, think about that. It was all about Trump, not about what we were actually dealing with as a society. So that layered on a whole complicating factor that I think, in fact, contributed to him losing the election in 2020. They don't have that going on now. So it's a whole different ballgame in this moment in time. But Anthony Fauci, he's up on Capitol Hill, and he's trying to justify what was done. Look, have some humility, guy. A little humility would help. You know, people would actually be a little bit more forgiving if you actually just sort of said, hey, you know, we got this a little bit wrong. But he's never going to actually admit to that. Despite in private hearings, these were not televised, admitting that he had no clue. The whole 6 feet distancing thing, that was all just made up on the fly. Somebody came up with that one and they decided to go with it. I mean, do you remember when he told 60 Minutes on CBS News, Dr. LaPook, that you didn't need a mask? No, don't worry about masks. That turned out to be a lie. He just basically wanted to hoard all the masks for hospital personnel, and he didn't want you buying a mask. So he went on 60 Minutes to say, don't worry about the masks. You don't need one. And then, lo and behold, they're telling you to wear 2 masks, maybe 3. So what do you believe after a while? Look, Americans, they only have so much trust in the system. And you just came and spent it all, Anthony Fauci. Do we have, Drew, the transcript that came forward where he's actually saying that he kind of came up with it out of thin air? He can't even tell you how the 6-foot distancing rule ever showed up. I mean, unbelievable. Unbelievable. And yet today, he's there kind of saying, well, it was the CDC. It was the CDC. This is very different than what he said just a few weeks ago in the private testimony. Let's go to Anthony Fauci, ladies and gentlemen, there on Capitol Hill, showing just exactly his true colors. Here we go.
Do you recall if it was ever suggested to be 10 feet?
I don't recall, Mitch, if it was ever suggested it was 10 feet, but when I made my explanation of what it was, I was saying that there was no trial that looked at 10 versus 6 versus 3 versus not even worrying about it at all.
So what was that all about? I mean, they came up with rule after rule after rule after rule, and they were so proud to deliver those rules. And they never thought about how any of it really affected people. They didn't care, it seemed. And then the Democrats got a hold of it all. And so once the Democrats got a hold of it, well, then it was, game over, because then it became politicized. Here we are. We've got the transcript that he originally said, and they said, do you recall reviewing any studies or data supporting masking for children, for example? And he says, well, I might have. I don't recall specifically that I did. Well, that's alarming. So there was no data, no studies that they were looking at saying, okay, we're going to mask all the kids. I mean, there were kids that really struggled to re-enter society because they had to wear masks for so long. And then all of a sudden, the mask's off. How do you communicate with people? They didn't learn sort of the basics of human expression. In Japan, there were consultants that were getting paid fortunes because they had to teach people how to smile all over again. And especially young people, especially little ones. Then he goes on to say that, specifically on this, there have been significant, it said, studies showing that there is, the question, I should point out that the lawmaker said, since then, it's been pointed out that people have had these problems, like young children especially, are now struggling. They can't speak as well, right? They can't articulate as well. And they can't express themselves as well because they were in these masks. Have you followed up on any of those studies? Have you looked at them, Fauci? Did you bother? Do you care? The answer is no. But I believe that there are a lot of conflicting studies too. I still think that's up in the air. Come on. You mean to tell me you don't buy the idea that if a kid sits in school in a mask for a year, that they're maybe not going to learn as much, they're not going to be able to articulate as much, and they're not going to know how to express themselves as much? Do you even need a study, Anthony Fauci, to understand something like that? I mean, wow, the arrogance that he has exhibited is extraordinary, is absolutely extraordinary. It's all about the science, all about the science, all about the science. I'm sorry, but you know what? If you were one bit of a scientist, you would understand that it's not just the science. It's also the economy. It's also mental development. It's a whole lot of things. That stuff matters, Fauci. It matters. MTG kind of taking him down. This was funny to watch. It's all about the science. Let's take a look. Marjorie Taylor Greene holding Fauci's feet to the fire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fauci, you were quoted on CBS Face the Nation saying it's easy to criticize, but they're really criticizing science because I represent science. Do you represent science, Mr. Fauci?
I am a scientist who uses the scientific method to gain information.
Yes, you said you represent science. Do you represent science, Mr. Fauci? Yes
Again,
or no? Yes or no?
No, that's not a yes or no
Yes,
answer.
it's a yes or no.
I don't think it is.
Okay, well, we'll take that as a you don't know what you represent.
Oh, I...
You know, you got to hand it to her on that one. I don't know what he represents. I'll tell you what, he represents Anthony Fauci. And there's this whole issue you see of just exactly how the whole coronavirus thing came to be. It turns out that U.S. taxpayers, courtesy of one of the foundations that Anthony Fauci and others had okayed to give money to, were actually helping to support a very small portion of the research that was being done at the Wuhan laboratory, where it is alleged that this virus came from. I shouldn't even say alleged. I mean, you know, if it walks like a duck and looks like a duck, it's probably a duck. You weren't allowed to say this way back when. I think I'm clear to say it now. But this was like no-go territory. It's one of the reasons they were so angry with Donald Trump, because one reporter asked him maybe in May of 2020, hey, Mr. President, have you seen any evidence that suggests that maybe this virus could have come out of the Wuhan lab? To which he said, yes, I've seen some intelligence that suggests that's the case. And oh, what do you know, Anthony Fauci and company, they went nuts. Why were they so hostile to that idea? Somehow they were worried we were going to get into some kind of World War III or whatever with China, or they were worried about CYA, right? It was a CYA moment. They were trying to cover their tracks because maybe we shouldn't have been giving money for gain of function research to that lab. I would just say, look, you ought to know who you're giving money to. You ought to know whether they follow basic protocol for safety standards. The Chinese media had done their own report a couple years prior, boasting about how some of the scientists there in that lab did not use the protocol, meaning the gloves, etc., that you'd want to use if you're surrounded by bats. You know, and they boasted about it as though it was like some kind of, you know, great thing. Look at how strong our scientists are. Taiwanese television did a story on this. It was very, very interesting. So Anthony Fauci, seemingly just in this CYA moment all of the time, and the bureaucracy that was built up around him was very impacted by the political undertones of what was going on, or undertones, overtones. I mean, there were people that hated Trump so much, they were willing to use this to help orchestrate who would be the next president. And, you know, look, it worked, right? They were able to, I think, really get people worked up enough that they also, to the Democrats' credit, did all their ballot harvesting and went and got all the absentee ballots, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's why it's so important what Lara Trump's doing right now. She said, hey, you may not like it, but you know what? We got to do the same game, right? We got to be able to play in the same kind of fight. And so you need to make sure that people are registered to vote and that you've got the absentee ballots and you do all the groundwork ahead of time, because this stuff matters. This is really, really, really important. Look, crazy stuff happening. And all the time, we're dealing with more and more inflation. You've got a president now. Drew, I don't know if you have this graphic. This is from our friends at Committee to Unleash Prosperity, Steve Moore, and those guys, great economist. I love this graphic because it actually shows the change in the economy under these different administrations. You wonder why people are so fed up with Biden. This kind of says it all. So if you look at Bush, this is real income, like whether you went up or down in your real income. You know what real income is? That's adjusted for inflation. New York Times doesn't report on real income. They say, ooh, you know, incomes went up. And I'm looking at it going, but wait a second, what about real wages? Did real wages go up? Because real wages are what you really want to see. That's the stuff that's adjusted for inflation. Well, you got Bush showing a decline. You've got Obama increase, we'll give him that. Trump, big increase, we'll give him that. And then Biden, again, a decline. In fact, if you were to add up and look at Biden and Bush and Obama, guess what? Trump still outpaces all three of them in terms of real income gains for the median income worker. Biggest income gains that we had seen since, you have to go back to the 50s. You have to go back a lot of decades. And this is because you had a stable economy. We don't have a stable economy right now. We've got an economy filled with inflation. And I don't see this ending anytime soon, only because you have both parties that are pretty willing to spend, and I'll just say that. They're both very, very willing to spend money and print money. You have a Federal Reserve that is totally clueless. You get a Treasury Secretary right now, Janet Yellen, a total bureaucrat, a la Fauci, right, that doesn't get it. And so consequently, we got problems. We got economic problems. It's one of the reasons why I'm a big believer in making sure you're diversified. It's one of the reasons why I talk about gold. Take a look at it. If you're interested in investing in gold, I encourage you to go over to my friends at American Heart for Gold. Max Baker was just on the show. He's the president of the company. I think we're going to release that entire interview so you can see it in its entirety, but it was the Friday before last Friday. I was actually live from Ireland. He was on the program, and it was just fantastic and really, really interesting. Anyway, American Heart for Gold, wonderful gold company, extremely high rated. I want to point out that if you use my name, you can get up to $15,000. What do you know? They have a special deal in free silver, which is actually climbing like you wouldn't believe as well. Really interesting to see. I think a lot of people are looking at silver as an alternative to gold. Maybe they can't get into gold, and so they get into silver. Anyway, central banks all around the world right now are looking increasingly at gold because they're not feeling so good about the United States of America. Can you blame them? Right? 1-844-495-1115, or you can text Trish to 65532. Text Trish to 65532 and see about your chance to get up to $15,000 in their offer in free silver. Again, text Trish to 65532. I will also put the link in the notes. Actually, I'll just tell you. This is easy. This is like the greatest link ever. Trish loves gold. Trish loves gold and silver too. Anyway, that is American Heart for Gold, one of our sponsors on the show. We're so proud to have them here. They make a lot of this possible for you guys. All right, so Fauci's up, and it's a big news week. I mean, my gosh, it's only Monday, right? Only Monday. We got Hunter Biden. On trial. This is wild. So Hunter's in the hot seat because and by the way, this is Hunter walking into the courtroom. There's jury selection going on as we speak. Jill Biden also made an appearance. Hunter there with his new wife. I mean, what a guy. So this goes back to the days of his affair with Hallie Biden, who is the widow of his brother, Beau Biden. And apparently he was on all kinds of illicit substances, having an affair with her. While on these illicit substances, went and bought a firearm, which obviously you cannot do. And in filling out the forms, did not admit that he was addicted to these substances. He later, I guess, wrote about how he was really heavily addicted at this time. And there's some concern here because of how they also disposed of the weapon. Apparently, it was thrown away. Hallie Biden might have had something to do with that. And it was thrown away in a bin near a school. Apparently, the Secret Service actually discovered it. Near a school, not good, right? The whole thing, bad on every level. Well, this all became an issue along with his alleged tax evasion, along with his alleged foreign lobbyist career, because he was on trial, or this basically was a court issue. And the judge eventually decided, thank goodness, that this was a little bizarre. She couldn't sign off on a deal with him getting off on these gun charges. She couldn't sign off on it because they had also put into the fine print that he would never be prosecuted for any of the tax stuff related to his foreign lobbying. And she said, I've never seen anything like this. I mean, this is bizarre. I can't sign off on this. And so when she said that, it sort of triggered this whole thing. And he was like, all right, well, the deal's off. Yeah, you bet the deal's off. So now he's in court. And it'll be interesting to see how this goes, because over the weekend, Pops was there. They were out for a bicycle for two ride, the two of them together. Hunter's wearing a T-shirt with his dad's picture and number on it. And it's sort of a subtle, not so subtle message to everyone. Hey, my dad's the president. So for Biden, who wants to go on and on and on about how justice was served for Donald Trump, it'll be interesting to see how justice is served for Hunter Biden and whether or not he gives him, grants him any kind of ability to not have to go to jail, right? Is he going to pardon him? It's his son, after all, right? It's his son. Oh, they want you to remember that. In fact, former Senator Claire McCaskill was on MSNBC this morning saying, oh, it's his son, it's his son. That's what you're going to hear over and over. It's just, a father and his son. And why do they have to go after his son? It's so not fair. Let me tell you, if this were Don Jr., or if this were Eric Trump, they would go after him so hard. There's another kind of peculiar thing that happened, guys. A very, very peculiar thing, because you might wonder if, dare I say, the president could be accused of witness tampering, right? I mean, he showed up on Haley Biden's doorstep the other night, and it was a bit of a concern. We're going to get to that in a second, but we get some breaking news right now with KJP over at the White House, the rocket scientist press person that they have. She just talked about a potential pardon for Hunter Biden. Let's listen in.
Back to the first question. I know you said not a lot's changed since yesterday and that it's a personal matter, but from a presidential perspective, is there any possibility that the president would end up pardoning his son?
No. I just said no. I just answered. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Wow. Of course, it doesn't matter. It's her saying this, and he can say that all he wants, and then he can change his mind. But I think that they're trying to go with this narrative because you see they're trying to pin down Trump, and they want to say how bad Trump is. Some, like Dean Phillips, who tried to run against Biden, it might have been the best shot that the Democrats had to actually winning the election in 2024. Well, he's actually called for the president to pardon Trump. Actually, forgive me, that was an old clip. That we just saw. I think that, I'm just communicating with Jerry as we speak in real time, by the way. If you are not subscribed to the live version of the show, if you're listening on Apple Podcast, that's terrific. We love it. Keep doing that. But you also might want to come over to YouTube where we are live right now. And I'm looking at some of your comments coming in real time. But anyway, we're going to see if we have anything from the White House here on whether or not there's any commentary on whether he would pardon them. That could be coming in momentarily, so we'll stay tuned looking for that. But in the past, she has said, no, he's not interested in that. And I guess that's their story, and they're sticking to it for now. Here's another clip I want to show you from the other day. I'm wondering if there's any issue of witness tampering. I know you're not supposed to say this, but here's the deal. Joe Biden went to visit Haley Biden the other night. Now, Haley, as we discussed, is the woman that was married to Beau, the older brother, who died very tragically, and then took up with Hunter Biden. Wonderful guy that he is, right? And so she is alleged to have been involved in this discarding of the weapon. And Joe went by for a friendly visit the other night. Yeah, just to, catch up and talk old times and that sort of stuff. Everybody's like, well, wait a second. Why did he go? Why did he go now? And KJP said, just family business. Nothing to see here. Let's watch.
On another topic, why did President Biden have a private meeting with a witness who plans to testify in court against his son?
Can you say more?
Hallie Biden is a key government witness who allegedly disposed of a gun that Hunter is accused of buying illegally. President Biden was at her house this week.
I think the American people should also be told the full breadth of this, not just a part of this question here. As you all know, the president actually spoke to this yesterday during his memorial, I think impactful, powerful Memorial Day address, where he talked about the passing, the anniversary, the 9th anniversary of the passing of his son. And he visited her as that anniversary is approaching. He visited her days before the anniversary of the passing of his son. And she is family. She was married, obviously, to his late son. And I think that is something also to mention as you're asking your question to me.
So they did not talk about her testimony?
This was not about that. This was about literally the 9th anniversary of the passing of his son. That is.
Yeah, that's all. That's all it was about. I mean, who knows, right? Right? Who knows? I would say that it reminds me a little bit of that Loretta Lynch moment with Bill Clinton when they were caught on the tarmac. Remember that one? And it was just to catch up on the grandkids. Just the grandkids had nothing to do with whether or not she had any intel about what Comey was going to announce in terms of Hillary Clinton and whether they were really going to move forward with prosecution with Hillary Clinton for her server that she had illegally. So this is messy, to say the least. This is certainly very, very messy, but we're going to continue to watch it, right? I mean, it's just a very, very big news week. You've got Hunter Biden going on. You got Dr. Fauci apparently just tearing up right now. Moments ago, this just coming in, he got really, really upset. He got so upset because I guess it was the questioning from, was this MTG? Drew, I'm just asking. I think they're looking for it to see if we can get it for you right now. This is a story that's just coming in, basically admitting here that, you know what, he wasn't right on all of this. MTG was very aggressive, saying that she thinks that he belongs in prison for some of the decisions he came out with. And perhaps he's trying to make himself a sympathetic character. I don't know. But, look, it's a very divided thing politically, very divided, because you have the Democrats that want to hail him as the be all end all. You have the Republicans that are saying this guy way overstepped his bounds. I mean, look, live free or die is on the mug for a reason, right? And boy, does that carry a lot of weight right now. This is the expression on every license plate. This is a state motto in New Hampshire, where I was born and raised. It was like the first thing I could read on license plates. You know, you're walking through the grocery store parking lot with your mom and you see live free or die. I think that has an impact. And I think a lot of Americans really feel that sentiment. In other words, you do your thing, I do mine. Leave me alone. Let me have the freedom to make my own decisions. And during those dark days of 2020, we didn't have that freedom. There were people that lost their jobs because they were not willing to get the vaccine. Now, it's a personal decision, right? And they instead came in a very sort of swooping way and said, you have to do this. And I think that a lot of people will not forget that. I think history will judge the reaction that we had in fair ways, because there were consequences that somebody who's a scientist, and this is what gets me kind of angry, somebody who's a scientist just can't possibly appreciate from an economic standpoint and from a mental health standpoint. And that was the reality. He wasn't willing to consider anything else. And he's going to sit there and tell you he saved thousands of lives. Well, did you? Did you really? Or did you actually just put on a whole other set of risks? I know people that actually passed away because they didn't get the proper routine treatment that they needed. Because guess what? Doctors' offices were closed. You couldn't go in and get the skin cancer checkup that you needed because, or anything else that actually was vital in terms of preventing the loss of life. This is the legacy of Anthony Fauci. I think it's very complicated. And, before they put him as a pinup guy, which he was, right? Like, there were people that were in love with Anthony Fauci. I think that you just got to consider that he was very narrow-minded in his approach, and he wasn't considering all factors. I said and I maintain you needed a strong economy to fight this thing. We did. Instead, they shut down the economy, and they're like, oh, well, we made it strong because we printed money. Printing money is not the answer. You don't print your way to prosperity. You print your way to inflation, which is what we're dealing with right now. Right, that is the reality. This is still the overhang of all of that money printing. Anyway, we're going to have more on all of this tomorrow, more on this congressional testimony, of course, from Fauci. We're going to have more on Hunter Biden and his troubles, which are many. And we will have more on how Americans are responding to the conviction of Donald Trump, the guilty conviction, because I think it's not going to get the Republicans what they want. I'm just looking at some of your comments right now, and thank you for all the kind messages. I always tell you, I take my health very, very seriously. I drink a lot of water. I walk every day. I do a little weightlifting. Nothing like, we were joking, Drew and I, before the show started, nothing like MTG. My gosh, that woman, I think she can bench press a lot. So nothing like that, but I do try and keep myself healthy. And part of that is making sure that I take my vitamins religiously every day. And I thank Balance in Nature for those vitamins. I get them for free, but I can get you a deal. 35% off. They're another one of our sponsors. I'm proud to have them here on the show. Balanceofnature.com, 1-800-246-8751. You can use discount code Trish. Again, it's Balance of Nature at 1-800-246-8751, everyone. Just love having you here. Look at how we're growing. I mean, it's just incredible, right? Incredible to see. We have so many people tuning into these live shows. Rito Mega, we get some new names that have become team members. So thank you for that. It's great to have you on the team. Rito Mega 24. Mike, welcome back. Thank you. Yes, I'm my own kind of powerhouse, verbal powerhouse. I like I said, I'm not weak, but I don't have muscles like that. Working on it. Hightower, good to see you here as well. Again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for the commitment. Don, thank you for pushing everyone to like and to subscribe. Keep doing that, guys. Keep doing that. Thank you. Look at all these very, very nice comments. I do appreciate it. We have a very, very big news cycle, and this is why it's important. It's important we break through. And whatever you can do to kind of spur this along, right? With the likes, with the comments. I do read them all. I actually read all of them, both in terms of what you're saying in the live chat and also after the fact, because I look at all of the things that you say online. I appreciate it. I get it. Somebody says, send me the bill now, writes, I'm so tired of this corruption. Tired of the corruption. That's how it certainly feels. We get a lot of that, it seems, right now. Ian, thank you so much. Good to have you here. Excellent stuff. All right, we're going to do this again tomorrow, live. Similar time, make sure that you have set the bell so you know when I'm live, and I'll see you tomorrow afternoon. Thanks for tuning in.